Imagine this. You walk out of your house on a perfectly normal Tuesday morning. The sun's shining, birds are chirping, you're sipping that first glorious sip of coffee, and then bam! Right there, slapped across the windshield of your car, is a bright neon orange envelope. You know exactly what it is before you even touch it. A parking ticket. And not just any ticket. Oh no. This isn't your casual $25 oops, I parked in the wrong spot. This bad boy says $500. $500. Now pause for a second and think about that. $500 for a piece of paper accusing you of something you didn't even do? That's not just a ticket. That's like your bank account being mugged by the city in broad daylight with no mask on. And our story today is about a man who got exactly that kind of ticket. But instead of paying up like most people do, grumbling under their breath and maybe posting a rant on Facebook, he decided to fight back. And not just fight back, he actually won. And the way he did it? Honestly, it's so clever, so sneaky, and so satisfying that when you hear it, you're going to want to high-five him through the screen. This is the story of how one man beat a $500 parking ticket using nothing but his brain, a little research, and a loophole the city hoped you'd never find out about. Now, let's rewind a little, because to really appreciate this victory, you need to understand just how unfair parking tickets can be. See, cities love parking tickets. It's like their side hustle. Some places rake in millions each year just by handing them out. And the worst part, most people don't even bother fighting them. Why? Because it feels impossible. It feels like David going up against Goliath, except David doesn't even have a slingshot. He just has a wallet. And the city knows this. They bank on it. They know you're busy, you're stressed, and you're probably thinking, ugh, I'll just pay it and move on. But not our guy. Let's call him Alex. Not his real name, but it makes the story easier to follow. Alex was your average hard-working guy. He lived in a mid-sized American city where parking rules were about as confusing as IKEA instructions written in hieroglyphs. Seriously, the signs had arrows pointing left, right, forward, backward. Sometimes you needed a law degree just to figure out if it was okay to park there. And one morning, Alex woke up to find the dreaded orange slip on his car. According to the ticket, he had parked in a restricted zone. The fine? $500. Now, $500 is a lot of money. That's groceries for a whole month. That's a new iPhone payment. That's rent money in some places. And Alex wasn't about to let the city rob him without a fight. But here's the thing. At first, even Alex thought he was screwed. The ticket was official. It had his license plate, the time, the location, all neatly printed out. And he thought, well, maybe I did mess up. But then he remembered something. A little detail that didn't quite add up. And that little detail is what set him down the path to discovering a loophole so good, you're going to want to save it in your back pocket for the day you need it. Before I dive into Alex's genius move, let me just say this. Parking enforcement officers, if you're listening, we respect you. You're just doing your job. But sometimes, let's be real, the system itself is set up like a trap. You know those spots where the sign says, no parking on weekdays, except on Tuesdays, but also except between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. unless it's a holiday, or unless you're driving a camel, in which case you're good to go. Like, come on. It's like a bad riddle written by a troll under a bridge. And Alex was caught in one of those traps. Now, at this point in the story, most people would have sighed, pulled out their credit card, and paid the fine. But Alex? Oh no. Alex decided this wasn't just about $500. This was about principle. This was about justice. This was about standing up against what he saw as a legal scam. So he started digging. He went online, he pulled up the city's parking code, and he began reading. And let me tell you, if you've never read city parking regulations before, it's basically like torture. Dry, boring, endless pages of legal jargon. The kind of thing that makes you question every life choice that brought you to that moment. But buried in those pages, Alex found something. A tiny little sentence that would change everything. And here's where the story gets good. Because this wasn't just a random oops in the system. This was a loophole. A loophole that the city didn't want you to know about. A loophole that meant Alex had been wrongly ticketed. And once he figured it out, they had them cornered. Before I reveal what that loophole was, let me just say this. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the universe gives you a small win to keep you sane? Like when you find $5 in an old pair of jeans, or when you hit all green lights on the way home. Well, for Alex, this was that moment. Except instead of $5, it was $500 he was about to save. And the best part? He didn't just get out of paying the ticket. He embarrassed the city in the process. So Alex has just uncovered this tiny little line of text in the city's parking code. At first glance, it doesn't look like much, but to Alex, it's like finding a cheat code in a video game. And this is where the real fight begins. Now, let's get something straight. Fighting a parking ticket isn't easy. The system is designed to make you give up. They give you websites that crash halfway through payment, phone numbers that put you on hold for 3 hours, and appeals forms that look like they were designed by someone who hates humanity. But Alex was fired up. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about proving a point. So he rolled up his sleeves, poured himself a strong cup of coffee, and got to work. The first thing he did was take a closer look at the actual ticket. And you know what? That thing was riddled with errors. The location was listed as 100 block of Maple Street. Sounds fine, right? Except Alex hadn't parked on Maple Street. He had parked on Oak Street. Close, but not the same. That was red flag number 1. Then he looked at the time. According to the ticket, the violation happened at 7 a.m. sharp. The problem? At 7 a.m., Alex was still in bed, snoring like a chainsaw, and his car was parked outside his house on a street where parking was perfectly legal. So not only did the city mess up the street name, they messed up the time too. At this point, Alex is thinking, wow, if this ticket were a person, it'd be the drunk uncle at Thanksgiving who can't even remember your name. But here's where the real loophole came in. Buried deep in the parking regulations, Alex found a clause that said, for a parking violation to be enforceable, the citation must accurately list the location and time of the offense. Boom! There it was. If either the location or the time was wrong, the ticket was invalid. And in Alex's case, both were wrong. This was like the city handing him a $500 mistake on a silver platter. Of course, knowing the law is one thing, proving it to the city is another. So, Alex gathered his evidence. He took photos of where his car was parked, he pulled up his phone's GPS history, he even got a neighbor to write a statement, yep, his car was right here. And then, he submitted his appeal. If you've never filed a parking appeal before, let me paint you a picture. It's kind of like sending a strongly worded email into a black hole. You hit submit, and then nothing. No confirmation, no timeline, just silence. Weeks go by, and you start to wonder if your appeal went to the right place, or if it's sitting in someone's spam folder between Nigerian princes and fake lottery winnings. But eventually, Alex got a response, and when he opened that letter, his jaw dropped. The city wasn't backing down. They claimed the ticket was valid and that he still owed the full $500. Now at this point, most people would have cracked. They'd sigh, mutter a few choice words, and just pay the fine. But not Alex. Oh no. He was just getting started. Because here's the thing about bureaucracy. It's slow, it's clunky, and it hates persistence. And Alex? He was about to become the most persistent man in the city. He filed a second appeal, this time requesting a hearing. That meant he'd get to present his case in front of a real person, not some faceless system. Picture it, a small gray government office, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a long table stacked with files. On one side, Alex, armed with his photos, GPS data, and neighbor's statement. On the other side, a parking officer looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The hearing officer comes in, sits down, and says, "All right, let's hear it." Alex takes a deep breath and lays it all out. The photos, the GPS data, the clause in the parking code. And then he drops the mic. Not only was the location wrong, the time was wrong too. By your own laws, this ticket is invalid. Silence. You could practically hear the fluorescent lights flickering. But of course, bureaucracy doesn't like to admit defeat. The officer argued the mistakes were just minor errors. Minor errors? That's like saying you can serve someone soup without the bowl. Alex wasn't having it. He calmly pointed back to the exact line in the code and said, "Minor or not, the law is the law, and by the law, this ticket doesn't hold up." And then, the hearing officer leaned back and said the magic words. Ticket dismissed. Alex had done it. He had beaten the system. But oh, we're not done yet, because what happened next turned this from a simple win into a legendary one. When the ticket was dismissed, Alex asked the hearing officer for something extra, something bold, something that made the city squirm. And when you hear what it was, you'll understand why Alex didn't just win, he destroyed them. The hearing officer says the words everyone dreams of hearing when they fight a ticket. Ticket dismissed. It was official. Alex had beaten the $500 parking ticket. The loophole worked. Justice was served. Cue the imaginary victory music in the background. Now, most people at this point would have smiled, packed up their evidence, and walked out feeling 10 feet tall. But not Alex. Oh no, he wasn't done. See, Alex had spent hours digging through parking codes, gathering evidence, and showing up to fight his case. He wasn't about to let the city off easy. So when the hearing officer said, "Do you have anything else to add?" Alex leaned forward and dropped a bombshell request. He said, "Yes, I'd like reimbursement for my wasted time and expenses." You should have seen the look on their faces. The officer blinked like Alex had just asked if he could bring a llama into the courtroom. Reimbursement for fighting a ticket? Most people don't even know that's possible. But Alex, he had done his homework. Because hidden in the city's appeals process, there was another tiny little clause. It stated that if a ticket is dismissed due to errors by the issuing authority, the appellant, that's Alex, has the right to request reimbursement for costs related to the defense. Now, the law was vague. It didn't spell out exactly what costs meant, but Alex was ready to push it as far as it would go. He listed off his mileage for driving to the hearing. He listed the cost of printing photos for evidence. He even cheekily suggested compensation for the time he spent researching the case. At this point, the officer looked like they were silently praying for the ground to swallow them whole. The hearing officer scratched their chin, shuffled the papers, and said, "Well, technically he's right. That's when Alex knew he wasn't just walking out of there without paying $500. He might actually walk out with money in his pocket. And that, my friends, is the kind of plot twist you usually only see in movies. So, what happened next? After a bit of awkward silence and some back and forth, the officer reluctantly agreed. Alex was entitled to a small reimbursement. It wasn't huge, just a few bucks for gas and printing costs, but it was the principle of the thing. The city had tried to squeeze him for $500, and instead, they ended up cutting him a check. Talk about a reverse Uno card moment. Now, imagine walking into a government office where they try to fine you $500 and leaving not only free, but with money in your pocket. That's not just a win, that's a victory dance moment. That's the kind of story you tell at every barbecue, every family gathering, and yes, eventually on YouTube. And here's the best part. Word started to spread. Alex told his friends told their friends, and pretty soon people around the neighborhood were asking him, "Hey, how did you beat that ticket?" It became a local legend. The guy who didn't just beat City Hall, but made them pay him. Now, let's pause here for a second because I want you to picture this in your own life. Imagine you're staring at a $500 fine sitting on your kitchen counter right now. You're stressed, you're angry, you're thinking about all the ways you'd rather spend that money. Then imagine not only shredding that fine into confetti, but also having the city mail you a check with a little memo line that basically says, "Oops, our bad." That's the dream, right? That's like life handing you free dessert after you already ate the whole cake. But let's be clear, Alex's story isn't just about luck. It's about persistence. It's about paying attention to the details that most people ignore. It's about not letting the system walk all over you just because it's easier to give up. Because here's the truth, most tickets go unchallenged. The system thrives on people shrugging their shoulders and paying up. But every once in a while, someone like Alex comes along and says, "Nope, not today." And when that happens, the results are glorious. So, before I wrap this up, let me leave you with one last image. Can you imagine the city accountant who had to process that reimbursement check? Wait a second. We fined this guy $500 and now we're mailing him $12.75? What is happening? Somewhere out there, a bureaucrat probably shed a single tear that day. So that's how Alex did it. That's how he used a loophole to not only beat a $500 parking ticket, but also walk away with the ultimate moral victory. And honestly, I think it's proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the little guy really can win.
So, what do we take away from Alex's story? It's not just about beating a parking ticket. It's not even just about the money. This story is about paying attention to the details. It's about realizing that the system isn't always perfect, and sometimes the people running it are just counting on you being too tired, too busy, or too scared to fight back. Alex proved that when you slow down, read the fine print, and stand your ground, you can turn what looks like a hopeless situation into a complete reversal. And honestly, that's a pretty good life lesson. Because let's be real, we've all been there. Maybe it was a random late fee on your credit card that made no sense. Maybe it was a gym membership that kept charging you even after you canceled. Maybe it was a landlord who swore you definitely scratched the floor when you know you didn't. Life is full of these little battles where authority tries to flex and hopes you won't question it. But Alex's story shows what happens when you do question it. And that's why I wanted this to be the very first story on this channel. Because this channel isn't just about entertainment. It's about those everyday fights we all deal with.
Money, rules, scams, unfair charges, and yes, ridiculous tickets. It's about exposing the nonsense, finding the loopholes, and laughing at the absurdity of it all, together. Think of this channel as your late-night campfire, where instead of ghost stories, we're sharing real-life battles against everyday nonsense. Now, if you've made it this far, first of all, thank you, seriously. You're the reason this channel even exists. Second of all, I need to ask one tiny favor. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button. Not just because it helps me out, although it really does, but because I want you to be part of this community. A community of people who aren't afraid to question things, laugh at the ridiculous, and maybe, just maybe, fight back when the world tries to hand them a raw deal. Oh, and hit the like button too. Otherwise, the parking enforcement fairy will sneak into your driveway tonight and put a $500 ticket on your car for breathing without a permit. Don't risk it. In all seriousness, though, stick around. Because next time, we've got another story that's just as crazy, maybe even crazier. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. Until then, remember Alex's story. Remember the loophole. And remember that sometimes the little guy really can win. Thanks for listening, and welcome to the start of something awesome.